what exactly is going on right now. So if you wouldn't mind kind of telling our audience a little bit about who you are, your company, and maybe how your company has transitioned into this whole working from home thing, maybe we can start there.
Sure. Who do you want to go first?
You can go. Go ahead.
I'll happy to go first. Be the brave soul first through the door. So David Blake, the co-founder of the Future Work Studios, also the executive chairman of Degreed. So Degreed's largest office is in Salt Lake City, but we also started that company in San Francisco, sort of co-located, and had pretty early a remote workforce. So can talk about our experience with remote working both then and what it's meant now that all of a sudden everyone is remote. As well as the co-founder of the Future Work, which has launched two businesses, one called Learn In and one called Book Club. And by the very nature of those having been, those are new as of this year. So those were born in quarantine, and as such are both strictly 100% remote teams. So happy to talk about all of those.
Yeah, we will dive in.
Okay.
How about you, Heather?
Hi, so I'm Heather Zynczak. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Pluralsight. And Pluralsight has a technology skills development platform, 7,000 courses online, and also a developer productivity platform to help dev teams be even more effective, which has been highly leveraged during this work from home mode. And one of the things I'm responsible for at Pluralsight is all of our digital revenue and all of the subscribers who buy directly on our website, so all of our individuals. And I think the question you asked is what are we doing during these times? And, standard ways, our whole company, we shut down all of our offices. We have offices in Salt Lake, Boston, and our EMEA headquarters is in Dublin. And we shut down all of our offices on March 12th, and everybody's been working from home for over a month. So that's what we've been doing internally and been managing a COVID plan that way. And then the second thing we've been doing is really trying to help our customers in the community. So we've had a ton of free offerings to really help people. And one of them is we made our entire platform, all 7,000 courses, completely free the whole month of April. And we did this to give back. With the employment rate spiking, we thought, and people needing to stay home to flatten the curve, how can we help people reskill? And how can we help people have something to do to encourage them to stay home and skill up? And our platform normally has about 1.5 million people on the platform, and we've had 1 million folks sign up for free April just in this month. So it's been massive, the amount of people, and we made it super easy, like no credit card, no time limits, just give us your email and you can come on and look at anything. And so it's been really interesting to see, it's been around the globe, and it's been interesting to watch like what countries have been more interested in it, what states within the US, the bigger the lockdown, the more usage we've had. So there's been some just really, and we've in our efforts to give back to the community, there's been some really interesting things we've seen from a COVID and a work from home perspective.
Awesome. And Nate, you guys are in fintech space a little bit differently, but tell me what you guys have been doing.
Yeah, so Nate Gardner with MX. We are a company, I'm our chief customer officer, and we are a company that harmonizes the world's financial data and then creates amazing money experiences for the end user, with the financial institutions and the fintech community as our emissaries in empowering the world to be financially strong. And so it's been a wonderful journey of learning for MX in a lot of ways, because our office is here in Lehi, Utah, and by and large, the majority of our workforce has been in Utah. We have a few that have been remote, but this was an awesome opportunity. We embraced it as such, as an opportunity to kind of flex a muscle and to gain some muscle memory around something that was new to us, which was how do we become a remote workforce that has the capacity to be performant and to be able to drive results in a time when financial institutions are really critical, when people's finances are very much on their mind, and when there are aspects of the of COVID-19 that are impacting people in such a significant way on something that is as critical as their finances. So it's been a really great opportunity, and we've learned a lot. And something that we thought a lot about at the beginning was, one, how do we view this truly from a position of as an opportunity to gain and flex a muscle, like I said, but also how do we use this as an opportunity to even increase already what is a very transparent and a place of transparency that MX has built from a cultural standpoint, but how do we lean in even more so, and how do we bring every team member more into that conversation? So right out of the gates, we instituted almost immediately, and we've seen a lot of companies kind of follow suit, a program of getting to understand and know how the remote experience was actually impacting team members emotionally, with what their capacity to actually get work done, a high degree of empathy around like the new normal, if you will, and by virtue of like constant kind of check-ins and touching base on what was actually going on. The other thing that we ended up, I think, doing well with MX was that we increased the number of our town halls. So the frequency by which we started to communicate broadly and share data around performance, all the way down to what's our cash position, what is it that we're doing from like a performance standpoint on both the maintenance of clients that we currently have, as well as growth in what we're experiencing from a growth standpoint. There are a myriad of other things that we've been doing to help drive and create value amidst the COVID-19, but that was sort of the impetus where we began. And there's some beautiful things that have come out of it that have really not only allowed us to harmonize the world's financial data, but also even more so harmonize what was already an incredible culture into something even more special. So it's been cool.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk more about that, because I think the theme of this time with a lot of businesses has been adapt and adaptability. And, you know, one of my favorite things at Utah Business has been this sort of creative drive to come up with new ways of doing things. You know, every issue of Utah Business, we have award winners, you know, the CEO of the year and the Women of the Year. And usually we photograph those people and we video them and we have these amazing multimedia packages about them. Well, we couldn't do that. So we hired a illustrator to draw pictures of all the CEOs of the year. And it was super interesting how they turned out. And I think that that's something that we'll continue to do moving forward now that we've got these relationships with these illustrators. So that's kind of what I want to learn from you as well. Now that you are remote, now that you've adapted, is there anything you think, oh, this turned out really great and I'm going to keep this going into the future?
I think I can chime in on this as a marketer. And then I'd love to say a couple things about what Nate just shared, because he had some interesting things that I think all of us are facing with our employee base. You really need massive transparency, the more consistent communication, like we're doing weekly town halls as well, like, because it comes back to humans need connection. And that's just who we are in order to thrive. And as a marketer, you know, my job is to build connections. It's to build connections with our customers, to our sales folks, to build connections customer to customer, build connections with our product. And how do you do that in a time when connection is hard? Or it's not hard, it's just say it's different. And so we've really had to pivot. We have 2 major user events a year, and the European one was scheduled for London at the end of March, which you can imagine no one was going to be doing several thousand people in a conference hall in London at the end of March. And we moved that to virtual, and we did a virtual tech skills day yesterday. And our tech skills day last year, you know, had tens of thousands of people that participated in some way. And yesterday's through live streaming had 205,000 people attend. And so, but it's not enough to just get more people to come. How do you connect them? And how do you build connection? And I think we've found some really interesting, cool things, and we're still learning, we're still struggling, and we're still innovating. And I think the companies that are going to come out of this faster I don't think we're going to go back to normal anytime soon. I think there's going to be a new normal. And the companies that have innovated to figure out how do we take advantage of this new normal and build connections in this new normal are the ones that are going to do the best, in my opinion.
Yeah, just dovetailing off of what Heather just talked about, we did the same thing. We had almost right out of the gates going into this distributed way of interacting with both clients and with our own team members. This a digital kind of conference that was really powerful, and the thing that was amazing in doing that was that it did bring together a lot of the connection, a lot of the sort of humanity, because you're actually seeing people in their environments while doing this conference that is their sort of humanity. You're seeing children. You can probably hear one of my children in the background right now. And you're seeing them in sort of this environment that you would normally not see them at a conference, let's say. And so it is allowing for like a little bit more intimacy in even these discussions, like, hey, how are you doing? What is going on in your life? And I've appreciated the way that those questions have sort of come at the front of many of the business discussions that we're having. It's actually allowed us to pivot in a lot of ways on how we're doing some of these digital events. We just started something called a Wake Up with MX, and it's actually, we're sending breakfast out to a group of individuals who register for the event through DoorDash, and we're actually having them eat breakfast with us while we have like a little round table that we video. And so you've got clients and partners that are interested in what's going on in the space, but they're eating breakfast at their home that we've actually sent them. And then we're having a little chat and a roundtable, which then we distribute out to a broader group. And I think that intimacy is one of the things that has been incredibly beautiful and valuable about this, is that it's giving us a view into the life and the humanity of the people, the humans that we engage with on a daily basis. So that's something I've loved.
Yeah, and I think to your point, like we had a lot of people that were willing to come on and be to speak at our virtual events that wouldn't have been willing to speak, that weren't willing to speak before. They're like customers, like, oh, I can do it from home. Yeah, I know I said no to being on stage, but yeah, I'll video from home. and you're right, you get a level of intimacy because just in their natural environment, they share more. So I totally agree with that.
This is the introvert's dream right now. What about you, David? Anything positive coming out of this, you think?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think Degreed has always done really well is we just said, it's funny. Our motto is that Degreed is not your family, which is actually a line I think first purported by Netflix in their famous culture deck, but we mean almost the exact opposite by it. So when Netflix says Netflix is not your family, they followed that by, we're not here to be nice. We're A players. And if you can't keep up, like, we're just going to send you packing because we're the best of the best. And that's what Netflix is. So we say the same thing, but mean almost an entirely different thing by it, which is Degreed is not your family. Your family is your family, and your family is more important than Degreed. That it's family first. And we've said full stop, that your family is more important than Degreed. And whatever that means, we support you, sort of full stop. And so we've always done that. But I think, the world just had, we've talked about sort of work-life balance for a very long time, many, many years. And then there's sort of, a philosophy of work-life integration. And like it or not, everyone just experienced, work-life integration. And so I think to make that work requires a certain level of kindness. And I think that's what I would hope, persists beyond this is, we have learned that even with the increased demands of essentially all of our workers who had children are now homeschooling their kids, without additional help, that we've still been able to be, just as successful and just as productive, even though, honestly, more time is being given to people's families right now than is being given, previously. Less time is being given to the company than it was previously, and yet we've managed to be just as successful. So I think that that kindness, the sort of family first, that integration. We've learned, that kind of behind the suit and tie, we are all just people, living in our homes, and so really we've just kind of enjoyed the kindness and that family first aspect that we've seen.
Yeah, we've actually, a phrase that we use at MX is embrace the humanity of being human. Like this is one of those opportunities where that integration of truly the thing that makes us unique as a species on this planet is a thing to be celebrated. And something that I've loved and, would say that probably all of us have encouraged, and we probably all have various stories, are the moments of recognizing that humanity of team members without having been like guided to do it. And we've had a number of those. We had a team member who kicked off a Good Morning MX. It's different than the Wake Up with MX. It's this Good Morning MX podcast and show. And they wrangled in one of our executives and an engineer to do this every morning. And so it's an enormous production, but it is got a lot of humor in it, and it pulls in a variety of team members from around MX to kind of like talk about different topics, and generates some levity and some just exuberance for being alive, which is beautiful. Countless stories of individuals reaching out with little care packages that they actually like door dashed, or they sent like crumble cookies or like Crust Club pies to team members that they knew were suffering or like having a tough time. We've had a few people who've had babies or who are going to be having babies. And so there have been a few virtual showers that have occurred where, things were happening to support team members. And I've just loved that connection. And to Dave's point, like the notion of, hey, there are these other very important and critical parts of your life that you need to prioritize. But also you can count on us as an extension of your family, has been sort of the mindset at MX to provide that support. Because there are a lot of team members we've found on like that are more junior, that are maybe newer in their career, that are actually finding themselves isolated in like an apartment with some roommates that are not their family, or that maybe have a home environment that isn't quite as supportive. And so those have been some areas that we've tried to really focus on and say, how do we build and create sort of that continued embrace that they felt coming into MX, and support on that level.
I think one of the things that's probably healthy about this is acknowledging all the ways in which it makes stuff harder. And actually, I was at an event, it's probably January, February, as before any shelter in place sort of orders had hit. And it was about remote work. And one of the suggestions that came up is that for companies that have some remote workers, but not all, one of the things that they did was they did a week where everyone had to go remote, and they did it as essentially an exercise in empathy for all the people who are in the office to have to go home and work at least 1 week fully remote, to just sort of hit all the snags, feel some of that isolation, feel some of that distance, feel some of the frustrations and friction, just so they could empathize with their teammates who were remote. And I think, look, there's parts of this that are just, hard. And so, what can we learn from this? What are the hard parts because the world's probably going to be remote for a while, and even the new normal will probably, be different. And so I think, some of those are, being on Zoom all day is exhausting. I think, there's been some media pieces about that. Like there's a difference. You are on camera, you're in a fishbowl, sort of like there's eye contact the whole time. Like our brains just weren't evolved for that, so there's like, it can be exhausting. I think, finding when there's so much interruptions, finding and creating space for essentially flow, for the creative parts of our day and our job. It's hard when Slack is going all day, when Zoom, when email. How do you create time and space? So one of the things at Degreed, because we always had this remote workforce, we actually have hours, Slack hours, You can, across certain teams, especially those with people in different time zones, we have essentially constrained when you are allowed to Slack so that it gives people fresh blocks of time where they can go deep into their work, be creative, find flow, not be living 15 minutes at a time, not have those sort of persistent interjections, as well as for people in other time zones so that they didn't, wake up and have to go back and read 12 hours worth of everyone else's interactions that they then missed, that they would then feel left out of, and like they didn't have an opportunity to participate in some of those decision making. And all of that was made better by actually just constricting when people are actually allowed to be doing real-time Slack.
I loved
because that's the problem with Slack, is that it's always on. There was something to be said for email that you can check during a certain hour and everything's there, but the Slack, man, it's always on.
Yeah.
So I like that.
I just want to chime in. I loved what David said about, having everyone during this time be remote, and a lesson in empathy, and the company who did this before this, because it's been really interesting for me. Over 10 years ago, when I worked at SAP, I had a very global team, and we had just moved from the Bay Area to Park City. And I had 2 years where I was managing, hundreds of people from Park City. I was remote, and they were all over the globe. And, my CEO was in Philly, my CMO was in New York, my head of product was in Germany. And that experience of being remote during that time is really different than the remote experience today, mainly because of technology. We didn't do video calls, you were just on calls. And so you couldn't see the people. And so it's just how much technology has changed the remote experience. And the other thing I would throw in on the lesson of empathy is, the majority of my team at Pluralsight is not remote. So on my leadership team, 2 of the 9 people that report to me are not in Utah in the office with us. And I think this last, 6 weeks that we've all been remote has changed how we experience them, because now we're in their seats. We know what it's like to jump on the call where somebody's, you shouldn't be whiteboarding when somebody's on a call because they can't see it. And how do you use the tools that you have to do things remote? I think it is a great lesson in empathy. And when we go back to whatever our new normal is, I think one benefit that's going to come out of this is that it's going to be a better environment for remote workers, because everybody has experienced it. And so it will be top of mind for you to start the call on time, or to make sure you've dialed in instead of a conversation in the room, or to ask the people that are on the call and not sitting with you, what they think on a particular topic. I think that's one thing that's going to really, I think it's a positive benefit that's going to come out of all of this.
Yeah, totally. And that does make me wondering, you said some things about teams being connected and having empathy for these team members. Well, how do you stay connected now? It is a little bit different. We're not, I'm not hanging out with my team in the office where we talk about murder mystery podcasts all day and, the random life parts of business. So a lot of times that can get lost, I think, in the remote world where you're on Slack just talking about the business things you need done. I know everybody does it differently, but at Utah Business, I'm working on a story right now about Skinwalker Ranch. And so we have the whole team watching the History Channel show of Skinwalker Ranch, and we watch it together and kind of live Slack it. So what are the things that you guys are doing at your companies to help teams still feel connected and together while this is going on and we still have work to be done?
Yeah, one of the things that we've encouraged is that at the start of many of the discussions that occur with Slack, they've talked about just sort of like, the Zoom meetings just sort of piling up. And I think that because they are piled up, oftentimes you can get a launch kind of directly into like the business of the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And we've really encouraged team members to talk and have the connection as humans again in those interactions, to say, hey, how is everybody doing? What are you experiencing? I think we, those who've been in a non-distributed workforce, take for granted the fact that you bump into individuals and you have these sort of like surprise encounters with individuals, and there's like an element of physicality. We shake hands, we bump knuckles, we slap people on the backs, we embrace, even if it's a side hug. You know, there's this physical element of being human that you experience that actually has an emotional impact on you. And so doing your best to kind of give virtual hugs by actually saying, hey, what's going on? I care about you. Like, tell me about how you're navigating tough things, what's happening with your family. I think those are really important ways to connect, so that you don't end up with having completed a full day and feel emotionally empty because you didn't have somebody emotionally that you filled their cup and that you had them maybe fill yours. Some other things that we've been doing that are just kind of fun. We have an MX dance party at the beginning of the week where people get on and we've got music playing. Some people just watch that aren't brave enough to actually dance, but we have other people who kind of dress up in their best attire and dance. We have people posting playlists of like pick-me-ups. I talked a little bit about some of the care packages that individuals have sent. And I've found that some of the things that we were doing for our team members, we've continued to do, but we've actually taken those like meals and smoothies and bagels and whatnot and provided them to the first responders. And the way that the team members have responded to us doing those kinds of things has actually been really powerful, and brought, I think, even more of that kind of love and care towards one another.
Yeah, I mean, we've done a couple of things. I mean, I was on a virtual happy hour yesterday with Degreed, with Learn In. We did Jackbox, which is Jack Black's virtual game nights. Games, they're a lot of fun. You know, and book club was actually born out of this, which is, you know, in this moment, had book groups that all of a sudden, you know, were sort of popping up. We're happening on Zoom instead of in real life. And we saw authors doing pop-up, you know, book, they were leading sort of book club discussions on YouTube Live and on Facebook Live. And, you know, it had been something we had been exploring, but really sprinted to stand up, the bookclub.com, which allows people to get together and do a virtual book club, but they're all author led. So we're combining those two worlds. Authors were sort of jumping in and doing this, and people were trying to figure out how to get their book group together. And so bookclub.com is author led virtual book clubs. And it's been a treat. I did a book club with my extended family on Sunday night, and, you know, which we had never done before. I mean, that came as a function of how do we as a family stay connected during this time. And so we all read, it was a youth title because there's a lot of cousins in different ages. And so we read a youth title together, and then had the book group on Sunday. And it was incredible. I mean, just you know, nothing like good literature to pose interesting questions, you know, that we as a family had never really, you know, kind of talked about with each other. You know, our conversations always tended towards, you know, sports and, you know, work updates and different things. And, you know, it was a really meaningful way to connect, you know, in this moment.
David, if I get nothing else out of this call, which I've already gotten a lot, I'm gonna go use bookclub.com. Like, I'm an avid book club person. I've had a book club for over 20 years, and we're meeting in a couple weeks, but we've been doing them virtually, so I'm gonna use that for sure. And just Elle, to answer your question a little bit from a Pluralsight perspective, a couple things I've personally been doing similar to what Nate and David shared. We have a virtual happy hour for all of marketing, but we do something specific in it. Like, I love the dance party, but like we've used Jack Black's Jackbox, but we've also, like, we did a contest with baby pictures, and everybody had to submit their baby pictures, and we all had to guess on who it was. And so things that can encourage people to be interactive, especially for, it's hard when you have, you know, 50 people on a Zoom to all kind of come together. So that's one thing we've done. The second thing I personally have done is I've started joining my direct reports, their direct report meetings. And I'm like, hey, I'm going to take 20 minutes, and I go around and just ask, you know, how they're doing. Like, tell me what's going on in your household. And it's been, I feel like I've gotten to know my marketing team better through that than even just the hallway conversations, because people have shared, folks who are married to first responders and what that's like, and people with newborns and toddlers at home, they have no care, and they're in the picture. I've gotten to see everybody's babies, and it's just, people have been just kind of asked, like, how are you doing? Like, what's this like for you? Don't talk about work. And so I think finding those moments of connection with them personally is super helpful. And then the other side, which I'm going to go on to what David said, the problem I think also with this situation we're in right now is you don't shut down. You're always connected, whether it's Slack or 10 hours of Zoom. And so the other thing I've been trying to do with myself personally is to put some kind of a schedule into where I have breaks that I go for a walk for 15 minutes in between Zooms. And I'm encouraging my team to do the same thing. We've been working harder than we have ever. Like, this hasn't been a break for us because we've had to shift all of our marketing to these, virtual programs. We did Free April, which is probably one of the biggest marketing programs I'll ever do at Pluralsight. So people have been burning the midnight oils. So I've been trying to put things in place that people do shut off and shut down. So like, we're taking a day off as a marketing team, and no one's allowed to email or Slack in a week or two in May. So, like, how do you encourage teams to disconnect from this? Because I think that's one thing that's really hard in this remote world, is that you really can always be on, and it's not that healthy.
Yeah, something that we've always emphasized at MX, but it's become even more of an emphasis to the very point of helping people know where they are at from a performance standpoint, so they can sort of like disconnect, has been making sure that from a metrics standpoint and from like a performance indicator standpoint, that there is clarity for all team members. So we've really encouraged that if a team member feels like they have a void or a gap there, that they surface that they say, hey, look, I don't feel like I clearly know what that performance level needs to be. Partly because what we've realized is that when you're in a proximate work environment, you sort of get a lot of validation points, right? Like, even though you may not be conscious of them, you get people saying, hey, that was great, or like, well done on this project, or hey, like, even if they're soliciting feedback, what do you think? And for individuals who are maybe now isolated, not necessarily knowing what their metric was that they were out to achieve or how to measure that performance, can be really sort of demoralizing. And so we've even put more emphasis on saying, hey, if you've got an area where you're uncertain about how you measure your performance, let's surface that so we can get it clear for you, so that you can sort of relax at the end of the day when you say, oh, like, I've accomplished what I need to accomplish, or my performance is clear here. And so that's an area that I think is really important, that if you've got team members who don't have clarity, they are suffering because they are actually not sure whether they are performing.
How does that translate to, I think a very easy ritual to do is to close your laptop, but then you have your phone. So how have you adjusted what apps you keep on, your notifications, the actual practical aspects of this, so that you have that time and space? Anyone?
Well, I can say to Nate's point, and then I can share for me personally how I shut down. But to Nate's point, I think if team members know that they're doing great work and they know they're achieving, they can shut down easier. And so, like, we have company-wide KPI metrics at Pluralsight, and those have been implemented since I've been here. We didn't have company-wide, and I think it gives people a level of security and freedom to be able to shut down. Because they know they're performing, they can see it in the data. And I think also the unsaid thing here is, like, these are uncertain times, and there are people that are concerned for their jobs, and we've seen layoffs here in the Utah community. And I think having those KPIs and metrics, so someone can see, like, no, I am contributing, I am adding value, I am achieving what I'm supposed to, it gives a level of comfort so that you can shut off. And so one thing I try to do is I try to go and have family time where my phone is not near me. So whether it's sitting on the back deck with my husband for about 30 minutes at the end of the day, having a glass of wine, or there's no screens allowed at our family dinner table for anybody. They're not allowed in your pocket even, because you can feel them vibrate. Or we also have a rule in the room that we watch TV in as a family. There's no screens allowed in there either. And that includes mom's phone. Because it used to be, oh, no screens, to my kids. And they're like, Mom, you too, your phone as well. Because, I'd be like, oh, I see this. So I think, are there some places or some events that are screen-free zones? And we have some of those. And I shut my phone off every night. So I remember I told an old boss, I was like, look, if you need to get in touch with me in the middle of the night after my family's asleep, here's my home phone number. You can call and wake us up. He never did. But, because I wasn't going to be one of those people that had my phone buzzing all night answering. So it's hard to set those personal boundaries. And I think everybody has to figure out what they are for themselves.
I was talking with a team member last night who was struggling with this. And one of the things that we were talking that came to my mind is Mr. Rogers was onto something when he would like have a change of attire. Remember, he would put on like a new sweater, he'd put on new shoes. He would like go through an exercise of saying, hey, I'm here and I'm present in like this time of learning and growing and engaging. And then when it's done, I'm going to go into another mode. And I think that's actually a really important thing, is to actually go through an exercise that puts you into a new space, a new set of mind or frame of mind. So I recommended to this team member, like, hey, maybe even if you're in casual clothes, go change your clothes. Do something that like puts you into a place that is a different state of mind, and make that a behavior that you are loyal to, and put some time.
And Nate, I think on that one, what's hard is a lot of us, when we weren't working from home, commuted. So I commute, or I used to before we had work, our shelter in place. I commuted every day from Park City down to south of Salt Lake and I had that commute time. That was my Mr. Rogers change my sweater time. I mean, yes, sometimes I did work calls in it, but that way, by the time I got home and pulled in my garage, I was ready for family time. And I think when you work from home, my commute is now 2 seconds of getting up and walking out of my office, and it's not mentally enough. And so I think that's a brilliant idea. Like, what's your Mr. Rogers moment now that you're home, because it's no longer that time you have in your car.
I know that is so true. The commute was kind of a weird rinsing ritual between home and work, and you kind of have to redevelop that now. I've been personally, when I'm done with the workday, I do yoga while I'm watching masterclass. They might sound like those are conflicting things, learning while doing yoga, but I really, really love it. And I've since realized, like, why am I going to yoga classes? These yoga classes suck. They don't let me to also watch masterclass while I'm doing it. I have to do what the teacher tells me. So I think there is this way that we can kind of redesign our rituals in such a way that they're almost better than the commute, and kind of even better than what our life was before, because we can develop these. So I think that's really cool. And I love the Mr. Rogers example. That's great. He knew what he was doing. Speaking of screen-free zones, I think everybody is going through this right now. We've seen this market shift to book sales going up, to puzzle sales going up, to print magazines becoming back in vogue. There's this kind of weird shift in the marketplace that seemed like it was going into a digital zone, and now there's this craving for it, which I think is really cool. So how do you think that will change any of your industries, kind of that need for screen-free zones, if any, because you are all very, very kind of tech-heavy products and everything. So do you see that shifting at all in the marketplace, or not really?
I mean, this will take it a very specific direction, but I think, in the world of education, there's a big open question right now about like university, about that experience. I mean, I think everyone's pretty eager to have their children back in school. But with higher education, there's this question of value, of, what are we paying for in education? Because if all of a sudden in the fall, I'm going to go, enroll in school or go back to school, is the price tag the same? And if what I'm getting is just the professor on camera, is that worth the same price tag as when I was there on campus? And so it starts to break apart the pieces, which is, what was that, campus experience? How much of that experience is worth how much of the price? And it's a really interesting question. I think, to your point, I think having this much distance, virtual, remote everything in many ways is recommitting us or waking us back up to the value of the physical, of the real, of the personal, while, pushing new boundaries and setting new norms. So higher education, I think it really is an open question. Are people going to be willing to pay the same amount for a different experience? And if not, how much are they going to be willing to pay for? How much are people going to be wanting to go back and have that campus experience? And I don't, it's truly an open question, but it's a big one because the consequences of it are immense. I mean, the universities in our state, they are dependent on state funding as well as tuition, and both of those at the moment are in question.
Yeah.
I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, please.
Okay. I think that, Elle, to your question, I think we're seeing the craving of things for the non-digital right now. Like, we're New York Times subscribers, but we always read it digitally, but I'm actually went and got this Sunday one in paper. I just this past week, because you're right, people are craving it. But I think people are craving some of those things, and we're seeing some of those lifts because the other aspects of our lives are so digital right now. And I don't think the other aspects of our lives I think we're going to continue to see digital there. People are going to continue to learn digitally, to David's point. People are going to continue to work, in a digital environment. We're going to see more people working from home than ever before. I don't think it's just going to go back to the way it was. And so I think, for me, I think the digital things are going to continue to skyrocket, which means I think that's why it's creating this need for some non-digital things on the other side, because our main modes of interacting at work and through learning are going to have a bigger digital component going forward than ever before. And so I don't see that. I see that increasing, to be honest with you. And I think, and to David's point, I think there's going to be new cost structures with that. People thinking about, how much am I willing to pay for this? How much am I willing to pay for that? We're looking at that with all of our events, for example. We're looking at that with our main product. Are there different price points we want to offer because there's going to be more digital users of it? There are free April, almost 90% of the people who found our free April offering that were new came on mobile devices around the globe. And so and they're going to consume the digital experience differently. Like for us, we provide learning content, and we need to have a lot of different types of content because the consumption in digital is different. So I don't think the digital is going away. I think it's going to expand even more so, but I think we have to think about, how do we price it? How do we make it more compelling? How can it be? What are the consumption models on mobile? I think there's a lot of really interesting things in all of that.
Yeah, one thing that I would also just dovetail off really quick from something David touched on, just education in general. Mad props to those teachers out there that are educating our kids while they've got kids at home and they're trying to navigate a full day of like school, or doing parades with like these kind of no-touch parades. Like, I've got so much gratitude for teachers for what they are compensated. It's just not, it's woeful. But I really appreciate those educators that are trying to make education meaningful. And honestly, I think there's a real opportunity here in K through 12. That's a passion of mine, which is how do we reshape that with the power of what a lot of these educators are passionate about. But I would say, I think there is no doubt that the digital need is growing. I mean, in the financial space, we've seen a massive increase and influx of people trying to get clarity about where they sit from a financial standpoint. And just what's happening in fintech and the financial services industry right now, the demand from the end user to say, hey, I need clarity, transparency, and guidance on how I become financially strong is just going to continue to expand and grow. So I think across all sectors, you're going to see digital and distributed experiences become more ubiquitous and more important. I think what that will also create, though, is sort of this need that we have as humans to engage in the physical world. And in education, for example, I think there will always be an importance of a physical space where I can actually go and build with my hands, and I can create with my hands. I can manufacture something with my hands. I think that the need for people to interact with the world and not just have it be a screen that they're interacting with, but like physical objects, is something that is really critical to our sanity. And so I think you're going to see an increase in those kinds of things, not just in like content consumption, but more so like maker spaces and like environments where individuals can engage with the physical world, because that's a void that has to be filled with the increase in digital experiences, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think to that point, I mean, I think the higher education example is a good case study because it is a picture of, I was reading an article about a woman who said she was going to go to NYU in the fall, and now that it's all remote, she is going to ASU. And I thought, well, then what were you spending that money on? Because it wasn't the professors and it wasn't the education you were going to receive. It was maybe the lifestyle that you're going to have in New York City, or some other tangible factor that maybe doesn't have as much to do with learning, or to Nate, your point, maybe is the learning is more tactical, and that's important. But I think, there's a reason. I actually wrote an article earlier in the year called "Is Higher Education Worth It?" And we broke down all the costs of education. And then I immediately followed that article up with why you should get a blue collar job, because I was finding in my interviews from the former that people were going to education and getting these jobs and then not liking them, and then reverting to something they could do with their hands because they were not finding any kind of meaning in the online world, and we're going to blue collar work. And I thought that was fascinating. There's this interplay where we need a little bit of both. I mean, I've never spoken so much with my mailman as I have the last month. So there's certainly these interesting environments, which I think is really interesting. We are about to wrap up, but before we do, I just want to get a quick touch point on all of you. What is one thing you think has been really positive to come out of this time, and what is one challenge you think we still need to overcome?
I can go. I think that a lot of what we've talked about here at the core of this is that I think this has awakened a lot of human beings to what it means to be human again, in like connecting and the importance of that connection, the empathy of feeling other people's pain, and not being able to be present to actually succor an individual in the face of like suffering. Something that MX has been spending time focused on is how do we actually alleviate and be a point of relief amidst all this. And one of the things we've been focused on is how we get this PPP loan stimulus money into the hands of the small businesses, with a massive effort around how we could build efficiency in how applications were being submitted to the SBA. And it's been really fascinating to see how like the effort that MX has put here has marshaled just great satisfaction, great joy, and like a lot of happiness from the team members, because it's a way that they can feel like they're contributing back to a lot of people who are suffering. And that calls to me this realization that people truly do want to lift and help one another. And the ecosystem that we are, the combined organism that we are as like an expansion of this universe, is something that we cannot escape. And the the value of being able to go back and help someone that is actually just an extension of ourselves is deeply embedded within us. And I think this has awakened people to that. In terms of challenges, I think that the challenge of how we balance getting back to an economic status where we are growing again, and the challenge of what that means from a health and like an impact on people's wellness standpoint is still something that I don't think we have a lot of clarity on, and we're not out of the woods with. And so I think there are a lot of people who are going to continue to need that care, those moments of recommendation on how they can adjust, guidance on how to be creative, because we are far from being out of the woods there.
I think that I'll jump in just on the education point earlier. I wanted to make a comment on that. I wholeheartedly believe that we need new forms of way for people to learn, and we need new options for education, and we need skills-based learning, and our traditional methods aren't the only ones. So I'm a big believer in that. And having said that, I really believe in the coming together of people at those points of what you get out of being part of a community. So I went to arguably what I think was a really expensive business school. I went to Wharton, and I would tell you 90%, and I think it was wildly worth all the money I spent, and 99% of the value I got out of it was the people that I met there, and the friendships I made, and the network that I built, and what I learned and continue to still learn from those people, my friends now 20 some odd years later. I graduated more than 20 years ago. So I think those don't go away, and you can't do that in a virtual environment. So I just wanted to add that little kind of comment to what we were talking about earlier. And then just quickly, for your final question, I think this is a really hard time for the planet and for people on the planet, because at our core, we are people, we need connection. And I think the opportunity, to your question, what's the opportunity, is in times of great change and in times of things that are difficult, it's those who come in and look at ways to innovate and be creative to see a new future. And that's what I'm challenging everybody in my organization to do. And I think we've been doing that in our own way in marketing at Pluralsight, and Pluralsight is looking at doing that. And I think every company and every individual needs to use, I think this is a giant time of opportunity to be innovative and creative. And that's what I would encourage.
Heather's comments remind me of one of my favorite quotes in the world, Eric Hoffer. In times of great change, it's learners who inherit the earth, while the learned find them beautifully equipped for a world that no longer exists. And just a +1 to what Heather was saying. But, and you have two educational sort of ed tech entrepreneurs on here. So the fact that it's skewed to education is maybe no real surprise. But I think one of the things that I really love and cherish about this moment is actually having my kids at home, both so I could be invited into their world of education and schooling and see what it actually looks like. There's nothing more adorable than a first grade classroom full of 6-year-olds on Zoom. It's just terribly adorable. My son has had the opportunity to sit through, he's probably sat through about 30 hours of my work meetings, and then just ask me questions afterwards. Hey, what did that mean? And why were they asking you this? And he's been able to see my world and learn that way. And I think what needs to change to reinforce what Nathan said, I think, it's great for us to learn that education and school is not a classroom and it's not a desk, that education can happen and look very differently. And yet the importance of teachers. And when we go back, I think, we've all learned in this moment the value and the importance of great teachers, and they really do need to be compensated differently, and and their value in the world and how we value them. I think just, we need to value them more. But I appreciate you, Elle, for getting us together, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you all so much for being with us. And I do want to tell everyone that is watching, we actually have episodes coming up about education specifically and healthcare specifically, and how this environment is changing diversification of the workforce as well. So stay tuned to our Utah Business live streams. But thank you guys all so much for joining us, and I'll see you all soon.
Thanks, Elle. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Bye.